The $100 trillion white gold lie, why the Lithium Triangle is 6 minutes from global chaos. A $100 trillion energy shift hangs on a desert that barely has water. Phones, EVs, the grid, priced by the level of salty lakes 2 miles up. Here's where it gets interesting. Altitude flips the chemistry and the clock. Evaporation should speed you up, right? At 3,500 meters the air is thin, nights snap below freezing, kinetics stall, and one cold snap can wipe a quarter's output. Can the Lithium Triangle deliver before water and time run out? 6 minutes from global chaos isn't a metaphor. It's a real pressure window you'll see later. Pull up a map, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, one fragile machine. The map that lies, brine, altitude, and vanishing water. Everyone talks about 3 countries. Don't think flags. Think one high plateau stitched by wind, rock, and closed basins that don't drain to the sea. The Lithium Triangle is a single hydrologic system broken into salas, salt flats, where ancient lakes left pockets of brine. That matters because what happens in one basin can echo next door through groundwater and climate, even if the border says otherwise. So brine versus ore. Hard rock mines blast and crush spodumene, then roast. Brines do chemistry with time. You pump salty water rich in lithium, spread it in shallow ponds, and let the sun slowly drive off water. As volume shrinks, salts crystallize out in steps. You push the brine down a cascade. Halite, then sylvite, then carnallite, shifting the ionic soup until lithium can finally be recovered and refined to carbonate or hydroxide. But here's the thing, that neat cascade rests on delicate evaporation kinetics. The brochure promise is simple. The Atacama sun works like a free factory. The reality at altitude is different. The air pressure is low. Water boils easier, but mass transfer across cold, thin air doesn't act like sea level. Days get hot, nights get cold, often below zero. Freeze, thaw cycles form thin ice skins that block evaporation, then break, then refreeze. Those swings mess with coprecipitation. Magnesium, sulfate, and boron tag along when you don't want them. Each impurity you carry downstream costs reagents later, lime, soda ash, acids, and burns time you can't buy back. Let's talk basic water math. To make a ton of lithium carbonate equivalent, you're not just moving lithium. You're moving and evaporating thousands of tons of water-laden brine across months. Freshwater also shows up in the balance, washing salts, dissolving reagents, scrubbing equipment, crystallizing final product. The exact liters per kilogram depend on chemistry and process, but in a hyperarid place, any extra cubic meter matters. Drawdown creates cones of depression in the brine aquifer. Because brine and freshwater often couple hydraulically, you can pull sweet water toward the salt nucleus, creeping salinity into community wells. Altitude stacks another tax. Pumps work harder in thin air. Diesel engines lose power. Workers move slower, safety margins narrow. And because the nights are cold, you lose heat from ponds and pipes. Energy you plan for reaction rates, it's bleeding to the sky. The evaporation calendar is not your financial quarter, it's the plateau seasons. Frost events can reset an entire pond train. Heavy summer rains, rare but real, dilute months of concentration in days. That's not a delay. It's a rerun. Immediate bottleneck, it isn't geology, it's rights and physics. To pump brine you need permits. To bring in freshwater you need separate rights. Indigenous communities rely on shallow wells and springs that also depend on the same regional water budget. Monitoring wells tell one story, trust often tells another. In some salas, companies argue brine is mineral, not water, and should be regulated differently. Communities look at dropping water tables and flamingo breeding cycles and say, call it what you want, the springs are fading. Here's the crazy part, the famous reserves numbers don't solve any of this. The triangle looks huge on paper because brine volumes and lithium grades add up across basins, but supply is not a volume problem, it's a pace problem. Evaporation ponds are time factories. You can't double the sun or halve winter. You can build more ponds, sure, but each pond still needs months to work through a chemistry that won't be rushed. Add more trains, and you also add more points where weather can knock you off spec. Reagents and logistics sneak in as silent governors. Soda ash, lime, acids, they come by road over mountain passes or through cramped Pacific ports. One stuck conv, a winter road closure, and your purity targets slip. At altitude, a single-lane switchback with a jackknife tanker isn't a story. it's a week lost. And because the brine chemistry varies even within the same salar, you can't standardize your recipe like a factory line. The operators earn their keep by tweaking every day. So when you see a corporate slide say, nameplate 50,000 tons per year, ask two questions. What's the brine grade and impurity ratio? And what is the real hydrology calendar? If magnesium is high, your lime bill goes up, your waste stream grows, and your ponds slow. If winters are longer or colder than modeled, take another quarter off the ramp. If communities withhold consent, your pumps stay off while your debt clock keeps ticking. Let's reframe this map. Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, yes, they write the rules, but the plateau writes the schedule. The central question for the whole story is simple. Can the triangle deliver at the speed the world wants without breaking the water that keeps the plateau alive? The stakes are plain. If the answer is no, phones cost more, EVs stall, grid batteries slip, and traders start pricing spot lithium by the level of brine ponds and the snow on nearby peaks. From these physical limits, we walk straight into promises. Public timelines, glossy reserves, and quarterly targets collide with weather and wells. In a minute, we'll test the paper against the ponds. The promise, paper reserves versus real production. On paper, the triangle looks solved. Thick reserve numbers, glossy decks, and a sea of zeros. But wait, there's more. Reserves are not bags on a pallet. They're a probability that under certain prices and tech, you could one day produce. Proven is tighter than probable, recoverable is smaller than in situ, and ramp rate is the trap nobody wants to print. Markets love totals, chemistry only cares about flow. Nameplate capacity is the favorite trick. A slide says 50,000 tons per year. Investors nod. But here's the thing. Nameplate assumes steady-state brine grade, stable impurity ratios, and a pond circuit that never resets. Real ponds breathe with weather. If magnesium creeps up, you dose more lime. That makes more waste and drags your residence time. If sulfate spikes, you co-precipitate the wrong salts and have to recycle stages. The number still sits on the slide. The field guys just work Fridays. Get ready for this. In these high basins, a single rain or frost event can reset an entire cascade. Operators call it losing the train. You don't just lose a day. You send a huge volume back to earlier ponds to reconcentrate, or you hold it while solids settle. Either way, your quarter's timing is cooked. Corporate calendars say Q2. Hydrology says, see you next summer. Now impurities. Everyone quotes lithium grade, but the Mg-Li ratio is the silent governor. Lower is better. Atacama sits far lower than Uni, which is why the world's cheapest barrels come from Chile. High magnesium means more reagents, more scaling, more filtrations, and a higher odds of off-spec intermediate brine. Each tweak echoes down the line. Your soda ash truck is late, fine, carbonate purity slips, and you rework product. Your acid shipment misses a window. You stop cleaning heat exchangers, and foul rates jump. Paper never includes the truck that never came. Timelines get even weirder when finance meets weather. Boards want quarter-on-quarter growth. Ponds want seasons. You can front-load capex, build fast, and still wait 9 to 12 months for a first full circuit. And if your first season is cold, your first production press release may be drums from a pilot line, not a real steady-state output. That's not a lie, it's a framing. But the grid doesn't run on framing. Here's the crazy part. When prices spike, bad projects get greenlit. The elasticity trap, spot jumps, juniors flood the market with P-slides, and capital chases the fastest to nameplate. Communities see dollar signs and also risk. Permits fly faster, and so do lawsuits. Social blowback can turn your IRR inside out. Even if you keep your license, a road blockade will drop your effective utilization below any spreadsheet. This is why cost curve models quietly carry a logistics haircut. Rain and frost aren't the only reset buttons. Brine chemistry drifts within the same salar as you pump. Early wells look great. Later wells creep closer to the nucleus and pull more impurities. You shift hole patterns, rebalance pumps, and hope monitoring wells catch the cone of depression spread before community wells taste salt. Meanwhile, your reserve model, based on a neat grid and historic samples, meets a fluid you are actively moving. It's like forecasting traffic while you're opening new lanes in real time. Corporate guidance also clashes with reagent math. Lime, soda ash, hydrochloric acid, antiscalants all need freight storage and tight handling at altitude. A mountain pass closes for a storm, and your just-in-time becomes not in time. Ports on the Pacific handle copper first, then everything else. Acid and soda ash compete for berth windows. One backlog ripples to multiple salas, which ripple to multiple offtake contracts, which land in battery plant schedules. You won't see that chain on page 2 of a deck. Let's talk offtake. Contracts turn paper into bankable revenue, but they can be boomerangs. Take or pay locks an automaker to tons you may not have in a bad winter. Miss deliveries, pay penalties, renegotiate price floors, and suddenly your secured revenue funds your own delay. Traders know this. They warehouse carbonate and hydroxide, watch weather in the Puna, and time releases into thin markets. That optionality looks like supply to a model and like leverage to a human. So what's real? Real is a ramp that bows, not a straight line. Real is a nameplate you eventually touch in a warm, wind-steady year, then slip under when frost bites. Real is a pond circuit that needs 9 months to breathe, with crews who save quarters by catching a co-precipitation front hours before it runs. Real is hydrology calendars stapled to board calendars and the staples bending. Paper reserves say abundance. The ponds answer with pace. And until those align, chemistry, weather, logistics, and consent, the promise stays ink, not tonnage. Chile, drought, depletion, and the Atacama equation. Chile is where the theory meets its limit. Salar de Atacama has world-class lithium grades and sun that barely blinks, and still the bottleneck isn't geology, it's water and trust. The basin sits in a hyper-arid belt where whole years pass with a handful of storm days. Every cubic meter you move shows up somewhere else as an argument. Start with the split most people miss, brine versus freshwater. Operators pump brine from the salt nucleus for lithium, and they also draw separate freshwater from peripheral aquifers for washing, reagents, and camps. On paper, those are two systems. Underground, they talk to each other. Create a persistent cone of depression in the brine, and you can drag gradients that tug on freshwater, shifting the balance that feeds springs and wetlands at the margins. That's not a headline. It's a quiet, steady tilt. Now layer on drought. Northern Chile has been in a multi-decade dry stretch. Glaciers in the high Cordillera are shrinking, snow lanes creep up, and recharge windows get shorter. Monitoring wells around Atacama have shown declines in some zones, and while companies point to management changes, communities see flamingo colonies pulse with food stress and nesting failures. The data is messy and spatially uneven, which is exactly why the argument never ends. One transect looks stable, another shows drops, and nobody trusts the other side's instruments. Here's where it gets interesting. Atacama's brine grade and low magnesium made it the cheapest pond system on Earth. That early success set expectations, but cheap doesn't mean consequence-free. As extraction scaled, the evaporation area ballooned, reagent trucks multiplied, and water debates got political. National agencies tightened reporting. NGOs flew drones over ponds. Indigenous councils organized basin walks and posted salinity logs from their wells. A technical dispute became a legitimacy fight. You feel that in contract rooms. Chile's national lithium strategy shifted control toward the state, with Codelco and other public actors expected to hold equity or operate partnerships. Legacy contracts, Albemarle and SQM, run on time clocks that now intersect with new rules, new quotas, and new expectations for brine and freshwater balance. Every renegotiation mixes production targets with water ceilings, biodiversity offsets, and monitoring obligations that have to work in real time, not just at audit. The politics would be tough even with smooth logistics. They're not smooth. Everything narrow funnels through the Pacific. The ports of Antofagasta and Medellin are efficient but finite, and copper is king on the coast. Soda ash, lime, hydrochloric acid, and filtration media share berth slots and tank storage with acids bound for copper leach pads. One backlog and your purification sequence slips because a single reagent missed its window. Upstream, the highways cross desert ranges with long single-lane segments where a breakdown doesn't detour, it waits. The plateau may be dry, but fog banks and wind can still shut a pass. Depletion isn't a cliff, it's a shape. Brine drawdown can reduce pore pressure, slow lateral inflow from the salar margins, and change the density stratification that helped keep higher impurity zones separated. Operators respond by shifting well fields, adjusting pump rates, even trialing re-injection of spent brine at depth. Re-injection sounds neat and often helps, but placement matters. Inject too close to production wells and you short-circuit the system, spiking impurities. Inject in the wrong layer and you push salinity fronts in ways you didn't plan. Communities hear re-injection and ask, what chemistry, what layer, show the tracer tests. Trust is the binding reagent and it's in short supply. Company dashboards can show real-time flows, but when a community's spring pulses lower for season, the graph on a laptop loses to lived memory. Chile's regulators have expanded public reporting, independent audits, and satellite-based water balance work. That helps, but the lag between action and effect, months to years in a basin this size, means disputes live a long time. Meanwhile, production targets don't wait. Nameplate in Atacama still looks strong, but the operational window narrowed. Daytime winds that once felt like free evaporation now peel heat off ponds and sling dust into intakes. Nights sharpen, forcing heaters on lines you didn't plan to heat at that scale. Add a frost run and the brine train steps back 2 boxes. Even the best operators budget for seasonal dips, and the floor isn't as high as the slide deck from 5 years ago. Chile's advantage is also its risk, concentration. So much midstream conversion, export know-how, and supplier networks sit within a few coastal districts that a localized port stoppage, a strike, or a hazardous materials incident ties knots in every schedule tied to Atacama. Benchmark watchers see it instantly in spot pricing. Automakers feel it weeks later in cathode plants running lean inventories by design. So where does the Atacama equation land? World-class grade meets worst-case water politics. Projects survive by proving, with instruments and outcomes, that brine drawdown and freshwater buffers can coexist without draining the living edge of the Sala. That proof has to be continuous, co-managed, and conservative enough to ride a harsher climate baseline. And even if you solve the hydrology to everyone's standard, you still live on roads and ports that don't bend for quarter ends. Cross the border and the rules flip. In Argentina, permits are easier and timelines friendlier, but the chemistry is harder. The currency wobbles and altitude turns hype into power and water bills. Argentina, easy permits, hard chemistry. Crossing into Argentina, the first thing you feel is speed. Provincial governors cut ribbons. Environmental files move in months, not years. Juniors plant flags on a dozen salas at once. From Salta to Jujuy to Catamarca, the message is simple. Bring capital, bring jobs, let's move. And they do move, roads scraped, camps go up fast, well pads drilled before the ink dries. It looks like the antidote to Chile's gridlock. But here's the thing, permits can run, chemistry walks. Argentina's salas are scattered and variable. Hombre Muerto, Olaroz, Corchari, Sal de Vida, Pastos Grandes, the names sound the same until you pour samples. Lithium grades bounce, and the magnesium to lithium ratios jump even faster. Some pockets look friendly, others are magnesium soup. That ratio is the headache. High Mg means more lime, more soda ash, more filters, and more steps where you can foul equipment or drag impurities forward. It also means each frost night hits you harder because your residence times are already long. Currency makes it worse. Projects raise dollars but spend pesos, then need dollars again for reagents. Capital controls trap cash. Import permits for lime, soda ash, ion exchange resins, membranes, and acids become mini-boss fights. A shipment can sit at port over paperwork mismatch or a quota cap. Meanwhile, the peso slides. Contractors reprice. Diesel goes up. Your pond train doesn't care about macro, it just starves for chemicals that aren't there. Logistics stack the tax. Salas sit above 3,500 meters. The roads snake through passes that ice over in winter. When they close, they close. You can't pay snow off a high plateau. Pumps that should hum at sea level gasp in thin air. Diesel generators derate. Your forklift doesn't lift as much. Every ton of lime is a winch job and a risk on a single-lane shelf road. A burn break on one tanker stalls a whole day's flow of inbound reagents. And because each sala's chemistry is its own soup, you can't pool inventory like a factory cluster. The wrong grade of soda ash for one process is just weight on a trailer. Here's where it gets interesting. Direct lithium extraction shows up like a shortcut. No ponds, faster cycles, lower land use. Operators pitch sorbents, ion exchange beads, solvent extraction trains. Pilot skids run in shipping containers with smart valves and neat dashboards. Early press says months become days. And sometimes in a lab that's true, but DLE is a system, not a module. It trades land and time for power and water. At altitude, power is not a footnote. You need steady megawatts for pumps, heaters, and regeneration. The grid is thin, unstable in spots, and far from many salas. So you bring diesel or LNG, add gensets, and watch your OPEX and carbon tick up. Water is the other shoe. Most DLE chemistries need large volumes for wash, rinse, and sorbent regeneration. You can design loops to recycle, you can target brine reinjection to stabilize pressure, but nothing is free. Every cubic meter has to come from and go somewhere. Reinjection in a layered sala at elevation is engineering plus geology plus luck. Inject in the wrong horizon, and you shuttle impurities back to your pump field. Miss your pressure balance, and you change flows to community wells faster than a pond circuit ever would. Magnesium never leaves the stage. In DLE, high Mg brines load sorbents with junk, shorten cycle life, and spike reagent use for cleaning. That means more acid, more caustic, more truck trips, more tanks to store chemicals at altitude. Your warehouse starts to look like a chemical terminal with wind storms. And the filter presses that catch fines after regeneration, they don't like freeze, thaw. A cold snap will cake cloths, slow filtrate, and reset your fast cycle to a crawl. Finance meets weather in awkward ways here too. Argentina's friendlier permits pull timelines forward. Boards expect earlier revenue. But even a DLE-first project still needs brine fields, pipelines, ponds for waste salts or polishing, and long procurement for specialized equipment. Currency swings push suppliers to demand dollars up front. Local inflation makes peso budgets stale in weeks. You hedge, but then a winter storm closes a pass, and your just-in-time membranes sit 3 weeks short of sight. Diesel dependence ties everything together. You burn it to lift brine, to heat process streams, to move trucks. When prices jump, your margin thins. When a strike hits a refinery or a convoy route, your uptime drops. And every extra liter burned makes your ESG slide a little harder to defend. Communities look at your generator stacks, then at the spring they use down valley, and the story gets tougher. So what survives? Projects with the cleanest brine chemistry, moderate magnesium, and shared infrastructure, power lines, reagent depots, maintained roads tend to endure. Modular phasing helps because you can pause between increments and match lessons to the next skid. The ones that struggle, high Mg salas far from grid tie-ins, with winter-closed roads and dollar-heavy reagent diets. Paper plans say commission in Q4. The plateau says, see you when the pass reopens. Bolivia, the paradox of plenty. Bolivia looms huge on the map. Sala de Uyuni is a white ocean, bigger than some countries, shimmering under a thin, brutal sky. On paper, it's the motherlode. In practice, it's a riddle. The grade isn't the killer, it's the ratio. Magnesium to lithium here runs off the charts compared to Chile. That single number turns a cheap sun factory into a chemistry slog. State control shapes the whole arc. Bolivia keeps lithium as a national project, not just a mine. The idea is value at home, brine to carbonate to cathode to cells, with partners who bring tech but not the keys. Sounds smart, keep the upside, keep the sovereignty. But here's the thing. When you're the gatekeeper, you're also the speed limit. Tech partners cycle in and out. Memorandums of understanding become pilot plants that never quite become steady state. You get ribbon cuttings, not reliable tons. Pilot plant purgatory looks like progress until you zoom out. You see modules running for months, making product in drums, announcing purity specs. Then comes the scale jump. Piping grows, tanks multiply. The same chemistry now needs more power, more water, tighter controls, and faster maintenance at 3,600 meters in air that eats engines and freezes anything not moving. Filters blind, sorbents foul, heaters trip. The fixes that work in a lab skid stall in a winter squall. Magnesium is the steady villain. High Mg means heavy lime demand, constant cleaning, and sludge streams that need drying and disposal. In evaporation, it shows up as carnallite headaches and coprecipitation losses. In direct lithium extraction, it loads media with junk and shortens cycles. Either way, you're shipping more reagents up, moving more waste around, and losing hours you can't buy back. A missed acid truck isn't a rounding error, it's a cascade. Water and altitude compound it. Uni isn't just high, it's exposed. Nights bite hard, days glare. Frost rims pond edges and slows residence time right when you need steady concentration. If you try DLE to dodge ponds, you trade land for megawatts and fresh water. The grid is thin, so you roll in diesel or chase a gas spur that takes years. Wash streams need recycling, reinjection needs geology to cooperate, and every cubic meter you push back underground has to land in the right layer at the right pressure, or you're salting your own intake. Politics sets the tempo. Communities here read the plateau before they read a prospectus. Water is identity and insurance. Meetings run long. Consent isn't a checkbox. It's a relationship that resets if a spring sputters or a truck spills. Sovereignty is not a slogan. It's a veto on terms that feel extractive. Add national elections, minister changes, and court rulings, and you get a project timeline braided with politics. A deal inked in summer can stall by winter on a procedural challenge that wasn't on anyone's Gantt chart. Here's the crazy part. Even the ground moves weird. Uni has a thick salt crust, hard enough for tourists in 4x4s, soft enough to surprise you after rain. Under that crust, brine mobility is its own animal. Heavy traffic, rigs, tankers can flex layers, change fracture paths, and nudge brine flow. It's not dramatic, it's cumulative. You push on a system that looks still and discover it's elastic. Wells that behaved last season drift off spec. Your model lags because the act of producing rewrites the map. Evaporation ponds versus DLE isn't a tech war, it's a resource budget fight. Ponds are slower but light on external power. DLE is faster on paper but heavy on energy and water. At altitude, with logistics that kink when a pass ices, fast is fragile. Lose a generator, foul a resin bed, or miss a chemical shipment, and your headline advantage collapses into downtime that's hard to claw back. The paradox is brutal. The bigger the salar, the stronger the pull to scale fast. The harsher the setting, the more it punishes that impulse. Social contract sits in the middle. Bolivia wants the full stack, lithium that lifts wages, builds plants, and keeps decisions in La Paz, Potosi, and Uyuni. That means more steps on site, more water use on site, more power on site. It also means more points of failure in thin air. You can design around a lot closed loops, smarter reinjection, wind and solar with storage, but every mitigation touches the same constraints you started with: altitude, water, cold. So what works here? Patience, modular builds, and brutal chemistry honesty. Start smaller, prove a train through a full year, log every frost reset and reagent swing, then copy the exact unit, not the dream. Share roads, share tanks, share power spines so a single outage doesn't cascade. Publish water balances that communities can audit in real time. And pick partners who can live with politics that changes the terms midstream without packing up the pilot and flying home. Uni is plenty on paper. In practice, it's a long conversation between physics and pride. If those two line up, Bolivia becomes a pillar. If they don't, the world's biggest salt flat stays a mirror, with everyone staring at what could be and not enough moving out the gate. Root cause window, how the lie took hold, historical. To see why the hype stuck, you have to roll the clock back. In the 1970s and 80s, geologists mapped a treasure belt of salars under calmer sky. Climate variability was narrower, frosts were predictable, rains followed old rhythms. Early evaporation tests looked steady, cheap, and simple. On paper, the plateau read like a solar factory with a lithium bonus. Then came Atacama's early wins. Low magnesium, high lithium, big sun, ponds worked, costs fell. Those case studies became the template everyone copied. Consultants lifted curves from Chile and pasted them into Hombre Muerto, Olaroz, Uni. Bankers turned evaporation days from one basin into feasibility inputs for another. That transfer wasn't lazy, it was normal for the time. But it planted the seed of the lie, that all salars behave like the best one. Here's where it gets interesting. Financing needs simple stories. A bankable feasibility study has to freeze a messy world into tables you can lend against. So models assumed steady brine grades, stable impurity ratios, and evaporation profiles anchored to mid-century climate data. Variance got tucked into contingencies, schedules smoothed, sensitivities played inside a narrow band. The pitch traveled well, free sun, no blasting, lower capex per ton, scalable with ponds. Financialization poured fuel on it. As clean tech demand rose, developers collateralized reserves into equity cycles. You could raise on in situ tons long before steady-state output. Juniors stitched Ps, PFSs, Offtake LOIs, and glossy sustainability decks into momentum. Traders and automakers, desperate for long-dated supply, signed take-or-pays that validated timelines born on spreadsheets. Markets priced optionality like inventory. But wait, there's more. The baseline climate shifted under everyone's feet. The plateau warmed, but not in a straight line. Daily thermal swings stretched. Frost windows bit later and harder. Summer rains arrived in odd pulses that drown a pond train one year and miss the next. Wind shear rose, stripping heat from pond surfaces and pushing brine skins around. Evaporation didn't just slow, it got noisy. The nice, smooth curves in old appendices bent and frayed. Meanwhile, chemistry crept. As wells moved and cones of depression spread, impurity fronts arrived earlier than models expected. Magnesium ratios drifted in brines that were supposed to hold steady within well fields. Operators adapted, more lime, more recycle, more filters, but every adjustment stretched residence times and widened the gap between nameplate and this winter. Policy leaned on optimism. Governments wanted value chains, not just pits and ponds, so strategies layered ambitions, local conversion, exports, jobs on top of timelines already taught. Chile tightened oversight but kept targets aggressive. Argentina eased permits to catch up. Bolivia insisted on sovereignty plus full-stack industry. None of that is wrong, it just stacked expectations on a system that was always seasonal, sensitive, and slow. Supply chains reinforced the belief. Early cost curves loved brine. Hard rock looked pricey when spodumene needed roasting and China controlled midstream converters. So analysts crowned the triangle the swing engine for EVs. That locked in budget cycles at automakers and utilities. When early Atacama data matched the thesis, the confirmation bias deepened. Uni's magnesium, Corchari's winters, Hombre Muerto's logistics, those were project-specific, not systemic. Then technology promises arrived right on cue. Direct lithium extraction walked on stage offering to compress time. Fewer ponds, faster turns, smaller footprints. Investment decks blended lab wins with commercial claims. The water and power footnotes stayed small. In older climates, with thicker grids, maybe you could brute force the delta. At altitude, in thin air, those footnotes became the whole chapter. So the lie wasn't a plot. It was a stack of reasonable shortcuts. Generalize from a winner, freeze climate in place, smooth variance for banks, and price futures off slides that hide pond seasons. It held because the first case really was cheap. It held because capital needs clocks that click, not calendars that sigh. And it held because free sun sounds like a cheat code when you're racing to decarbonize. The correction is underway. Data loggers, satellite water balances, and messy, lived operations are rewriting the curves. The old appendix becomes a warning label. Evaporation works, but only at the pace of a sky that no longer sits still. Next, we hit the trap that glues it all together. Altitude versus weather, where chemistry meets a 6-minute pressure window. The altitude trap, chemistry versus weather. So let's open the lid on the trap. At sea level, evaporation ponds are slow but predictable. Up here, the sky plays chemist. Air pressure drops, humidity swings fast, and heat leaves in a rush the second the sun slips. Every variable that sets your yield, temperature, pressure, wind, radiation, moves harder and faster than your control system can. Daily thermal swings are the first thief. Late afternoon can hit 20 Celsius, before dawn it can kiss -10. That flip is just discomfort. It drives freeze, thaw cycles across pond surfaces. Thin ice films form at night, sealing off mass transfer just when your brine wants to breathe. Morning sun fractures the skin. Wind pushes shards to the leeward berm, where they raft and shade a patch, while the rest of the surface heats unevenly. Result, patchwork evaporation, stratification you didn't plan, and little pockets where the wrong crystals start first. Here's where it gets interesting. Crystallization is timing. If temperature dips at the wrong ion balance, you coax out sulfate salts you meant to skip until later. Sodium sulfate sneaks into the matrix. Boron hitchhikes into precipitates. Magnesium coprecipitates as double salts, stealing lithium and building scale. Your operators see it first as a foggy filtrate or a pressure creep in a heat exchanger. You can fight back, adjust pH, dose antiscalants, bleed a fraction to rework, but all of that stretches residence time. Kinetics drift with altitude, diffusion rate slow in thinner air, convective mixing depends on gusts you don't control. On a calm, clear day, you can predict the slope of a concentration curve. Add katabatic winds dropping cold air off a nearby ridge at 4 p.m. and your curve kinks. You miss the window where carnallite should have finished, so it lingers into the next pond. Now your downstream liquor holds more magnesium than the recipe assumed, and your lime dose climbs. Evaporation ponds are time factories. You don't push a button to go faster. If you shrink residence time, you undercrystallize early salts, carry junk forward, and pay later with reagents and rework. If you stretch residence time, you tie up volume you needed for the next batch. Either way, the schedule breathes with weather, not with your Gantt chart. That's the trap. Altitude amplifies noise into downtime. Now the 6-minute pressure metaphor. In steady conditions, a pond circuit has a small window each day where temperature, barometric pressure, and wind set the sweet spot for the target crystallization step. Operators learn it like a heartbeat: open a gate, skim a crust, sample a liquor, nudge a flow. At altitude, that window can be tiny. A gust front arrives, barometer dips, temperature slips 2 degrees, and within minutes your supersaturation crosses a line. Crystals nucleate where they shouldn't. If you don't catch it, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, pick your site's number, you create an off-spec wave that walks the circuit for weeks. Here's the crazy part. A single cold snap can cost a quarter. If frost hardens across mid-circuit ponds 3 nights in a row, you lock out evaporation during the exact stage designed to strip magnesium double salts. They stay dissolved. When thaw comes, your downstream brine hits the polishing stages dirtier than design. You dose more reagents, foul filters faster, and your final crystallizer spits product with borderline purity. You can redissolve and recycle, but that pushes your whole train back. Announce temporary maintenance. Internally, you know winter stole your throughput. Altitude also punishes your instruments. Pressure transducers drift with diurnal swings. Thermal probes lag when ice films form. Inline density meters lie when microbubbles seed under sudden pressure drops. The fix is more sampling, more calibration, more human judgment. But at 4,000 meters, people tire sooner, rotations shorten. A missed 2 a.m. check lets a co-precipitation front sneak through. Storms reframe everything. Summer convective bursts dump cold rain that dilutes ponds while chilling surfaces. The double hit is brutal, lower concentration and slower kinetics. You don't just wait for sun, you pump transfers to restage chemistry, risking berm over tops if you misjudge inflow from catchments. Even dust storms matter. Fine particles seed nucleation, turning smooth crystals into dendrites that trap liquor and carry impurities. DLE doesn't escape the trap. Sorbent kinetics depend on temperature. Regeneration needs heat. Thin air strips it fast. Pressure swings change pump NPSH margins, inviting cavitation. A sudden gust cools piping, shifts viscosity, and your skid falls out of its narrow spec. You add insulation, heat tracing, bigger surge tanks, all good, all power hungry. At altitude, each kilowatt is a longer wire, a bigger generator, a louder footprint. And what do good operators do? They build weather into control, not into excuses. Micro-forecasting tied to pond moves, buffer volume in intermediate tanks to absorb bad hours, redundant reagent storage to avoid tight timing during storms, winter modes with different set points, longer residence by design, and preemptive cleaning to enter frost season with fresh surfaces. They also slow their promises. If the plateau gives you 6 good minutes, you plan like it might give you 4. The altitude trap isn't a mystery, it's physics with no patience. Chemistry can adapt, but only if the schedule bows to the sky. The water ledger, aquifers, glaciers, and a vanishing buffer. Follow the water and the story stops being abstract. These are closed basins, no river to the sea. Snow, glacier melt, and rare rains seep into fractured rock, drift through alluvial fans, and pool as two fluids that touch, fresh on the rims, dense brine in the salt core. Pump one and the other flinches. It's hydraulics, not ideology. Start with the coupling. Picture bowl with a salty center. Brine is heavier, it sits low, but the gradient from rim to core is one pressure field. When you drop brine levels, you tilt that field. Freshwater perched in fans and wetlands feels the pull. The cone of depression spreads as an oval underfoot, not as tidy circles on a map. That's why a Sala can look stable at one transect and still nudge a spring 2 valleys away. The ledger is spatial, slow, and unforgiving. Glaciers once buffered that ledger. High on the Cordillera, Fian fields and small ice bodies leaked summer melt that recharged fans months after storms. Now retreat is the rule. Smaller ice, higher snow lanes, faster sublimation in thin, dry air. You lose not just volume but timing. Melt pulses that used to bridge dry months arrive shorter, earlier, or not at all. Springs that rode that lag slip. Wetlands shrink at the edges. Flamingos, which key off brine shrimp and algae blooms, ride the swings and sometimes miss a season. Recharge lags reality even when it does rain. In these cold deserts, soil crusts repel quick downpours. Water runs as sheet flow to sinks, flashes through arroyos, then vanishes into coarse fans where it can sit perched above a clay lens for months. Meanwhile, evaporation claws back at the surface, stealing part of the pulse before it ever reaches depth. So a good summer rain may cheer the eye and barely move a piezometer. Legal water and physical water split here. Concessions get auctioned, meters get installed, and models assign sustainable yields. But the aquifer doesn't care about signatures. A permit might say 80 liters per second, while a dry winter quietly shrinks the budget by 20%. You can keep pumping to paper and still dig into next year's reserve. Communities feel that drift as weaker springs and deeper wells. For them, availability is the bucket level this week, not the line on a decree. Salinity creep is the slow tell. When the pressure tilt pulls freshwater inward, the mixing zone moves. A shallow pastoral well tasting at 500 mg/L total, dissolved solids creeps to 800, then 1,200. Tea turns odd, animals balk, skin itches, health signals show up as stress before any official threshold tips. Families switch to trucked water when they can. When they can't, they ration. That choice never shows on a mine's KPI, but it burns trust faster than any town hall can repair. Here's where it gets interesting. Each basin looks local, the drawdown pattern is regional. Stack multiple projects across neighboring salas, each with its own pump cones and reinjection plans, and you build a patchwork pressure map that no single EIA ever modeled. Add climate volatility, and the safety margin vanishes. A cold, dry winter, plus simultaneous ramp-ups, plus an over-optimistic recharge assumption, and you push a wetland past a threshold. That's when protests harden into veto points, and a basin hits a non-linear stop. Reinjection sounds like a fix, and it can help. Return spent brine to depth to stabilize pressure, slow fresh brine coupling, and shrink your footprint. But get the horizon wrong, and you short-circuit the system, sending lower-quality brine straight back to intakes. Miss the fracture network, and you build a pressure dome that shunts flow sideways into community screens. Good reinjection is tracer-tested, pressure-monitored, and humble about uncertainty. Bad reinjection is a headline waiting for a drone. The glacier piece ties to power too. As ice retreats, dry season hydropower in Andean foothills wobbles. That means thinner grids, more diesel backstops, and yet more water for cooling or washing at site. Every kilowatt you import has a water story upstream. Every cubic meter you use or return has a carbon story downstream. The ledger never isolates. Get ready for this. Across borders, the sum matters more than the flags. A Chilean port delay forces Argentine projects to hoard reagents, pushing maintenance later, spiking water use in a narrower window. A Bolivian court ruling stalls a pilot, easing regional chemical demand, which lets another project overdraw without tripping alarms. Separated decisions, shared aquifers, linked outcomes. So what does prudence look like? Basin-wide water budgets with cross-border data, real-time transparency for springs and wells, and production caps that flex with snowpack, not with budgets. Brine and freshwater managed as one pressure system. Reinjection proven before scale. Emergency brakes agreed with communities. Flows that step down automatically when gauges cross lines. No meetings required. The plateau can host lithium. It can't host wishful math. The vanishing buffer is the warning. If the water ledger goes red, the market won't wait for minutes. It will reroute supply overnight. Chokepoints and leverage, ports, power and permits. Follow the trucks and ships, and the chemistry turns into concrete. Everything inbound and outbound squeezes through a few Pacific doors and a handful of mountain roads. That's the first choke. Antofagasta and Medullones move acids and soda ash, but copper gets first call. Berth windows are tight. Hazardous cargo needs extra handling. Miss a slot, and your lime sits offshore while your polishing tanks drift off spec. You can't swap reagents like Lego. Wrong grade, wrong day, wrong tank. Production flutters. Up on the plateau, roads are the second choke. Long single-lane climbs, hairpins with no shoulder, and winter closures that don't negotiate. A jackknife tanker at 4,300 meters doesn't detour. It waits for daylight, a tow, and better wind. One stall starves 3 sailors because the same convoy was splitting loads at a junction. The cost isn't just a day. It's batches that cross their residence time windows and need rework. You feel it a month later when the crystallizer coughs. Power is the quiet third choke. Grids are thin at altitude, with long radial lines and weak redundancy. Voltage sags when a regional plant trips or a storm ices conductors. Ponds can ride that, DLE can't. Regeneration needs steady heat, pumps need NPSH margin, control skids need clean sine waves. So sites stack diesel gensets. They derate in thin air, drink more per kilowatt, and demand constant fuel. Fuel trucks, again, share those same icy roads. Miss a delivery, and your 24/7 process becomes a 12/5. Here's where it gets interesting. Ports and power talk to permits. Acid storage expansions on the coast trigger hazardous material reviews. New tank farms run into town pushback. Inland, a higher amperage substation needs environmental clearance, cultural surveys, and land easements through communities that already feel pinched on water. Permitting fatigue is real. Agencies juggle dozens of EIAs at once. Staff rotates. Each project assumes it's first in line. None of them are. Project stacking makes the math ugly. 10 juniors plan modest reagent yards. Combined, they exceed a port's hazmat cap for a quarter. A single flooded berth after storm shuffles every slot, and the backlog cascades to truck schedules, then to security shifts at Salah entry gates. Add customs. Different HS codes for nearly identical chemicals mean some containers clear in hours and others linger a week for lab verification. Your operator adapts, but the pond clock does not. Mountain weather multiplies leverage. A polar air mass drops across the Cordillera, passes close. Argentine sailors flip to rationing mode. Operators stretch caustic by relaxing filter wash targets, which seems fine until fines break through and foul a later stage. Meanwhile, a Chilean port strike over unrelated issues idles cranes. Tendered spot soda ash gets diverted to glassmakers. Battery-grade buyers outbid, but the ship can't berth anyway. On paper, global lithium supply is ample. On the ground, the right chemical in the right place is not. Grid instability feeds price. When a line trips, generators kick on, OPEX jumps, and carbon intensity rises. Automakers tracking Scope 3 notice. Contracts with ESG clauses tighten. A site that once sold a cleanliness story now pays for renewable certificates and still burns diesel at night. That reputational choke is soft but real. Banks bake it into rates. Insurance asks new questions about backup power and spill risk on frozen roads. Cost of capital inches up right when you need another tank farm. Permitting isn't just paperwork, it's leverage for communities. A road upgrade requires consultation. A reagent depot wants a buffer zone. A new wellfield needs a cultural clearance. Deadlines from lenders collide with calendars for fiestas, harvests, and assembly meetings held at altitude where a day's drive is part of the process. When people feel rushed, they reach for brakes they control. A checkpoint on the only road, a water truck turned around, a notice to the provincial office that freezes your next signature. Commodity traders watch all of this like weather. Warehouses in port cities hold carbonate and hydroxide. A rumor of a port slowdown, a snow forecast, a labor vote, and drums don't move. Prices jump on futures screens. Spot tightens. Some of that is signal, some is theater. But when cathode plants run lean inventories, a week's delay in Chile reads as a month's sweat in Korea. The leverage sits with whoever can wait longer without blinking. Plot twist, a transport strike far from the plateau hits immediately. A union dispute at a coastal trucking hub strands tankers. Acid for copper piles up. Hazard windows fill storage tanks. Ports cap hazmat intake until turnover clears. Lithium reagents get bumped. Within hours, pricing desks move bids. Within days, project managers slide maintenance forward to survive the outage. The fix is boring, redundant storage, diversified ports, shared reagent pools, but those require permits, land, and neighbors who trust you. So how do you bend choke points without breaking them? Shared infrastructure across salas, common reagent depots at mid-altitude, joint hazmat terminals at ports, pooled backup power with gas peakers instead of 1,000 diesels. Basin-level logistics scheduling that treats storms like planned turnarounds, not surprises. Permitting squads embedded in agencies so files move with context, not resets. And contracts that price risk where it lives. Bonuses for uptime through winter, penalties that land on missed trucks as much as missed tons. Choke points aren't flaws, they're the shape of the system. Power them, staff them, permit them with the same seriousness you model ponds, or they'll set the speed no matter what the chemistry says. The optionality game, China, traders, and offtake traps. Follow the money and the map redraws itself. China didn't just buy lithium, it bought options. Small equity stakes in brine fields, debt with conversion rights, and here's the lever, midstream plants in places that touch every ton. Conversion capacity in Yunnan, Sichuan, Jiangxi, tolling deals that flip carbonate to hydroxide on call. If ponds breathe with weather, the refineries breathe with price. Offtakes look safe until they flex. Automakers sign take or pay to secure supply. Traders and converters sign take or toll to optimize supply. The language hides the real move, valves. A Chinese converter with equity in a Chilean brine and a tolling line at home can throttle where value lands. Tight market. Keep hydroxide in-house, feed domestic cathodes, squeeze spot abroad. Soft market. Push carbonate to long-haul buyers to keep plants warm and lock relationships. Here's where it gets interesting. Price isn't just supply, it's timing. Traders warehouse carbonate and hydroxide in coastal hubs, Shanghai, Busan, Rotterdam, then meter it out. Where the models flag a cold snap over the Puna. Port chatter hints at a hazmat backlog. Futures nudge up. A few thousand tons held back for 2 weeks can move screens because cathode plants run lean. Was supply short, or did optionality decide to wait? In practice, both can be true at once. You're not gonna believe this, but hedges can love bad weather. Some desks write swaps against delivery schedules from specific basins. If frost resets a pond train, the physical short pays the financial long. That's not villainy, it's risk management. But it sharpens incentives to read the plateau like a trader, not a chemist. A satellite sees pond color shifts. A desk sees a basis trade. Western buyers walked in hungry. They needed tons to back EV plans and political promises. So offtakes locked floors and volumes before the basins proved ramps. Missed quarters then triggered make goods, discounts, or renegotiations that favored the party with storage and conversion slack. Automakers discovered that secured tons still needed a seat on a ship, a berth at a port, and a slot at a converter. The party who owned those three levers owned the spread. China's upstream bets were small but surgical. 20% here, a board seat there, prepay lines that tied cash flow to delivery windows. If a brine struggled, equity didn't scream, it listened. Move pumping rates, adjust reagent buys, ship intermediates instead of finished, route to a friend's plant 2 provinces over. That agility isn't a spreadsheet edge, it's muscle memory from the last 2 decades of metals. Optionality loves the midstream. While the West argued about mines, China built the in-between, leach reagents, membrane factories, ion exchange resins, crystallizers, packaging drums. That means when a Sala hiccups, they can catch off-spec liquor, rework it, and still sell to a battery maker without blinking. It also means pricing power can hide inside tolling fees that rise when others falter. Now the trap for juniors. An offtake with a headline automaker looks great for funding, but the payment terms often anchor to delivery of battery-grade product, not intermediate brine or low-spec carbonate. Miss-spec, and revenue shifts right, penalties nibble, and your cash cycle starves just as you need more lime and filters. Traders step in with prepay offers at a discount. You take it. They take the upside when the weather clears. Plot twist, offtakes double as data pipes. Delivery schedules, quality slips, reagent substitutions all flow to counterparties. Traders stitch that with vessel AIS, port lineups, and satellite pond reads. They don't need your site tour to sense a slowdown. Meanwhile, many Western buyers still treat supply as quarterly check-ins and press releases. Offtake floors can also trap on the upside. Lock a high floor in a hype year, then watch spot fall. You keep pumping at a loss to meet take or pay, eating reagents and burning diesel because the penalty math says ship anyway. Your maintenance slips, quality drifts. The buyer exercises a quality clause to delay. Floor turns into ceiling, you pay twice. China's leverage isn't mystical, it's patient. Equity plus tolling plus storage plus logistics equals time control. They can wait through a winter dip without panic selling. They can blend dribs and drabs from 3 origins to hit a spec while a single source buyer sits idle. They can also slow roll a partner through technical adjustments if price feels low without declaring force majeure. So what evens the field? Own time. Western automakers need midstream skin, joint conversion plants near ports with shared storage, not just mine paper. Build optionality into contracts, spec windows, intermediate acceptance, diversified delivery points. Pay for weatherized supply, bonuses for uptime through frost, not just annual volumes. And stop pretending that nameplate equals deliverable. Price the variance. Fund buffer tanks, winter modes, and spare reagent yards like they matter. Because to a trader with optionality, your 6 bad minutes are their best hour. In the end, chemistry sets the ceiling, optionality sets the floor. If you don't hold some of it, someone else will set your clock. Tech myths, DLE, sodium ion, and recycling reality. Tech always shows up with a cape, right? Direct lithium extraction promises to compress months into days. Sodium ion says ditch lithium altogether. Recycling says close the loop. Here's where it gets interesting. Each fix grabs a different lever, but most of them quietly pull harder on water, power, or time, the exact things that the plateau rations. Start with DLE. On a bench, it's elegant. Sorbents that love lithium-ion exchange, beds that swap fast, solvents that separate clean. You run brine through columns, capture lithium, spit the rest back underground. No pond farms, smaller footprint. It's true in principle, and some pilots make pretty drums. But the system cost lives in the plumbing. You need steady megawatts for pumps, heaters, regeneration, and crystallization. At altitude, grids wobble and air steals heat. So you bring diesel or gas, add heat tracing, insulate tanks, and your low-impact power line turns into a generator yard. Water sneaks in with a bigger bill. Most DLE cycles wash and rinse to keep sorbents clean and columns from clogging. You can recycle loops, but losses stack. Regeneration often wants caustic or acid, then a polish to get battery grade. Each step adds rinse water and a waste stream that needs treatment. In a hyper-arid basin, those cubic meters come from the same ledger community's use. Reinjection helps with pressure, but it doesn't erase water chemistry. Push the wrong mix back into the wrong layer, and your own pumps see it next quarter. Chemistry doesn't sit still either. High magnesium brines load sorbents with junk and shorten cycle life. Boron and sulfate foul. You burn more reagents to strip columns. That means more trucks, bigger tanks, and more downtime for cleaning. If you slow cycles to protect media, your days not months turns into weeks not days, and the edge shrinks. If you speed up, fines break through, and you chase purity at the back end. The win cases are narrow. Moderate mg, Lie, stable brine, power you can count on, and water you can actually spare. Now sodium ion. On paper, it's a relief valve. Sodium is everywhere, cathodes are cobalt-free, cells can be cheap. For grid storage or short-range cars, energy density doesn't have to win, price and cycle life do. The problem is inertia. Pack designers, charging networks, and vehicle platforms live on volumetric energy, not just cost per kWh. Sodium's density trails, so packs get heavier. For buses or stationary containers, fine. For mass market EVs tuned around tight weight and range windows, it's a bigger lift. Supply chains also favor the incumbent. Cathode plants, separators, formation lines, everything is tuned for lithium chemistries with known quirks. Swapping to sodium means new recipes, new QA, new warranties. It will happen in slices, two-wheeler fleets in Asia, grid farms near ports where size is cheap, maybe compact urban EVs. But it doesn't delete lithium demand. It clips the peak if it scales fast. It doesn't fill the valley when the plateau has a cold snap. LFP versus NMC is another mirage people grab. Shift to iron phosphate, save nickel and cobalt, stress lithium less. True on metals mix, but LFP still drinks lithium. And when price spikes or quality dips, cathode plants can't pivot overnight. Binders, coatings, cell formats all ride on stable inputs. The switch shows up slower than tweets, which means a bad winter in the triangle still ripples through both chemistries. Recycling looks like the moral and material rescue. Recover lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and break free from mines. Here's the thing, feedstock timing is fate. EVs bought in volume after 2018 are only now aging toward end of life. Scrappage will surge later, but in the next 5 years, there isn't enough retired cathode to feed large hydromet lines at full tilt. You can process manufacturing scrap, sure, but that's a function of how fast gigafactories ramp and how well they yield. It helps, it doesn't replace. Lithium recovery and recycling also isn't magic. Hydromet circuits chase nickel and cobalt economics first. Lithium comes back as a salt solution or carbonate that often needs re-refining to battery grade. That adds chemicals, water, and energy again. Closed-loop marketing is real. Closed-loop physics still pays the same taxes: purification, crystallization, drying, packaging. And unless you pair plants with cheap, steady power and good water treatment, the green badge fades at audit. Get ready for this. Each solution that looks like it frees you from time usually moves demand into water or power. DLE trims land and residence time, but leans on megawatts and wash cycles. Sodium-ion trims lithium per kWh, but needs new factories and fits fewer niches at first. Recycling trims primary demand later, but today it soaks reagents and energy just to rebuild clean salts. Nothing is free, and altitude makes every footnote louder. So what's worth betting on? Real pilots that run a full year at elevation, with public mass balances on water, energy, and impurities. DLE where chemistry suits, tied to renewables plus firm power, not a diesel parade. Sodium-ion where duty cycles forgive density, while lithium plants keep scaling. Recycling scaled near demand centers, with buyers who accept recycled specs at fair prices. And everywhere, contracts that reward uptime through bad weather, not just glossy nameplate. Tech can help the triangle. It can't repeal physics. The winners won't be the flashiest slides. They'll be the flowsheets that admit their taxes, pay them up front, and still clear the bar when the sky turns cold. The countdown model when markets hit the wall. So let's put numbers on the pressure. Start with demand curves that don't care about weather. EV sales compound from policy and price. Grid storage stacks as renewables rise. Even with sodium-ion nibbling the edges, global lithium demand keeps climbing through the decade. On paper, this is smooth. In practice, supply is a ramp that bows with climate and logistics, not a line. Here's where it gets interesting. Build a simple, honest model. Each Salah has a median year, a good year, and a bad year. Median hits 80 to 90% of nameplate. Good year brushes 100. Bad year lives at 60 to 70 because frost stole residence time or reagents missed a window. Now weight that across the triangle with actual weather correlation. Winters sink. Port bottlenecks cluster after storms. Suddenly, the portfolio effect is weaker than investors hope. Price doesn't fix physics in the short run. When lithium spikes, the elasticity looks strong on slides, but the next 12 months barely move. Ponds still need seasons. DLE still needs power and water. What high price does do fast is pull marginal tons and bad projects into the queue. That front-loads risk and social blowback without adding steady barrels when the sky turns. Now add substitution thresholds. At some per kilo price, battery designers stretch LFP harder or early sodium-ion fleets expand. Consumers slide down trims, delay purchases, or pick hybrids. Elasticity isn't zero, but it's slow because platforms lock chemistry years ahead. So the first hit from a supply miss lands on inventories and financing. Then it lands on build schedules for cathode lines, then on EV delivery lead times. Second-order shocks make the wall feel closer. Copper, nickel, graphite, all draw from the same capex pool. If lithium misses, CFOs rethink the whole battery metals slate. A delayed concentrator in one country pulls EPC crews from a brine project in another. The timeline slip cascades. Now your lithium short drags copper upgrades that feed grid buildouts, which feed storage demand, which circles back to lithium. The snake eats its tail. Get ready for this. We can track the edge with a simple pressure index. The 6-minute idea turned into a market trigger. How often, across the quarter, does each Salah's operating window shrink below its control band? Count frost nights, pressure dips, wind shear spikes, and reagent arrival gaps. When that count crosses a threshold, call it the 6-minute line, the probability of quarter misses jumps non-linearly. Traders don't need secrets to see it. Pond color shifts on satellite, AIS cues at ports, weather stations at passes, combine those and the screens move. Scenario it, bad winter, 3 cold snaps within 6 weeks across Jujuy, Catamarca and Atacama. Port strike, a 1-week crane stoppage in Megallones that pushes hazmat into rolling backlogs. Policy shock, a province pauses new water permits after a contested monitoring report. Alone, each is survivable. Stack them, and you push multiple projects into rework mode at once. The supply curve flattens, the cost curve steepens, and price spikes faster than substitution can arrive. Here's the crazy part. The market can look fine until the very last mile. Contracted volumes show secured. Guidance sits unchanged. Then a crystallizer trips because upstream liquor ran dirtier for 2 weeks. Purity slips. Tons miss spec. Instead of shipping, they recycle. On screens, nothing moved yet. In warehouses, drums don't load. 2 weeks later, cathode plants feel it. 4 weeks later, automakers adjust production shifts. 8 weeks later, retail prices and incentives dance to hide the lag. Behavior responds to stress. When operators feel a crunch coming, they ration reagents, stretch maintenance, and blend more aggressively to hit spec. That keeps tons flowing for a bit. It also burns future uptime. Filters blind sooner, fouling layers grow, and the next cold snap bites deeper. The countdown isn't dramatic. It's incremental debt across ponds and people that the next storm calls in. But what stops a wall from turning into a crash? Buffers. Not beautiful, just boring. Mid-circuit tanks sized for weather, not just average flow. Extra reagent storage at mid-altitude, not only at ports. Spare membranes and heat tracing staged before winter. Contracts that accept intermediate in a pinch, so partial value moves instead of nothing. And crucially, cross-basin coordination on water so reinjection and pumping don't trip neighbors into protest at the worst moment. Price signals matter, but timing matters more. If you're a buyer, you pay for resilience, not just for tons. That means bonuses for winter uptime, not just annual volume, acceptance of blended specs within safe windows, and midstream capacity you co-own near ports. If you're a producer, you publish variance, not just averages, and you model bad years into your debt covenants so a frost doesn't become a default. The countdown ends one of 2 ways. We choose physics, pace ramps to weather, fund buffers, and match water to reality, or the market chooses for us with rolling shortages that set prices, priorities, and winners we didn't plan on. The wall isn't far. It's just hidden behind averages that don't live at altitude. Human pressure, communities, labor, and legitimate consent. Walk any village on the plateau and you see the trade on the street. Pastoral life leans on springs, salt-tolerant forage, and wide family nets. A mine offers steady pay, hot meals, and clinics. People don't pick ideology, they pick weeks. A cousin takes a guard job. An aunt sells food to bust crews. A nephew drives reagents on the pass. Cash flows in as wells feel lower. That's the tension, 2 safety nets pulling on the same water. Payrolls show up fast, prices follow. Rents near salt towns jump. A teacher's salary buys less flour. Store shelves carry new goods, then run thin when roads close. Families start splitting time, kids with grandparents by the springs, parents on 2-week rotations up at camps. Migration looks like a choice on paper, on the ground it's a hedge. If lambing misses a season, at least there's the shift. If the shift cuts, there's still the herd. Health signals whisper first. Dust lifts from haul roads and finds lungs. Skin dries under stronger winds. Salinity creeps in shallow wells, tea tastes off. Blood pressure rises with altitude stress and shift work. Clinics count more stomach trouble when trucked water replaces springs. None of this screams stop alone, but together it wears trust thin. When a company rep points at a dashboard, people point at a kettle. Labor is its own pressure valve. Work at 3,800 meters pays a premium, but bodies pay too. Rotations shorten, sleep breaks under bright days and cold nights, and accidents spike on descents after long shifts. Skilled operators, instrument techs, DLE specialists, crystallizer chiefs are scarce. A rival project opens, offers a bonus, and your best crew walks. Training restarts, mistakes climb. The pond train does not forgive a learning curve. Here's where it gets interesting. Consultation is not consent, and deadlines don't bend to assembly calendars. Laws promise consulta previa, but legitimate consent lives on rhythms, planting, harvest, festivals, mourning. Meetings happen when the community is ready, not when a lender needs a signature. Push the pace, and people reach for the brakes they own. A checkpoint on the only road, a turnback of water trucks, a letter to a provincial office that freezes your next permit. Veto points are local and precise. A family controls a spring spigot, they close it for a week to demand new testing. A town owns the easement a fiber line needs, they hold it until the clinic gets a generator. A road skirts a burial site, elders insist on a detour with new culverts and a fence. These aren't abstracts, they're negotiations anchored to places with names and stories. When companies treat them like line items, resistance hardens. Social license is cheap until it is. For months, everything runs on goodwill and coffee, then one off-spec discharge stains a ditch. Photos, drones, WhatsApp, overnight trust evaporates, security gates close. NGOs amplify, investors ask new questions. The restart cost dwarfs what it would have taken to co-design a monitoring plan with public dashboards and shared keys. Cheap turned out to be expensive. Legitimate consent has bones you can see. Free means no stipends that look like pressure. Prior means talk before drilling starts, not after the first pond berm rises. Informed means full flow sheets, water budgets, and re-injection plans in plain language, with translators and time to ask real questions. Consent means a community can say no or yes with conditions that stick when managers change. It also means enforcement, joint committees that can slow pumps when gauges cross lines without waiting for a minister. We're not gonna believe this, but the best operators hire their critics, not as PR, as auditors. They fund independent hydrogeologists chosen by communities. They pay for lab tests at third-party facilities and publish raw data. They hand over satellite subscriptions so locals can watch ponds the way traders do. They set automatic step-downs on pumping tide to basin snowpack and spring flows, and they accept the hit in a dry year. It looks soft. It saves seasons. Labor stability comes from predictability more than peak pay. Weatherized camps, heated maintenance bays, oxygen support, and real rest rules matter. So do shuttle schedules that land at daylight, not in the frost fringe when accidents spike. Training ladders that turn helpers into operators, keep knowledge on site, and arrival waves a bonus. Profit share that survives a down quarter keeps teams from chasing a headline raise that vanishes after commissioning. Because here's the crazy part. Communities and crews are the first alarms for water and weather stress. A driver notices fresher mud by a culvert. A cook hears of a spring running weak 2 valleys over. An operator feels a pump cavitate more on cold mornings. If they trust the system, those clues move fast and turn into preemptive moves. Slow a line, stage reagents, shift a crew. If they don't, those clues stay in a break room until they show up as a shutdown. Consent isn't a one-time form. It's a running budget of trust paid in data, time, and humility. It slows you early to save you late. And on a plateau where weather and water already set the pace, the human pressure you ignore is the one that will stop you first. The inflection, what survives, what breaks. So this is the bend in the road, not the end, just the point where the plateau forces choices. Winners share boring traits, highest grades with moderate magnesium, brines that don't drift much season to season, shared spines, power lines, reagent depots, paved climbs that stay open when passes flirt with ice. They run winter modes, stock extra membranes, and publish water balances communities can read. They underpromise, phase builds in modules, and only copy units that survived a full year. Projects that break look glamorous on slides. Big nameplate, high MG brines far from grid ties, single lane access, thin storage, diesel everywhere. They lean on Q4 commissioning, treat permits as paperwork, and carry just-in-time reagents through a mountain pass that doesn't do just-in-time. The first cold snap exposes the spread between bankable curves and the real window. Then a port hiccup starves caustic. Then a local veto pauses a road upgrade. Each hit alone is survivable. Stacked, it flips guidance to apology. Corporate strategy is already pivoting. Fewer megaprojects, more Lego, repeatable trains with common spares and mirrored control logic. Ramps stretch. Buffers get budget lines. Finance teams price bad winters into covenants. ESG stops being brochure talk and becomes operational plumbing. Reinjection proven at pilot before scale, third-party water dashboards with shared keys, automatic pump step-downs tied to snowpack. It reads slow, it runs. Policy has to match. Basin-wide water caps that flex to hydrology, not headlines. Cross-border monitoring for pressure fields that ignore flags. Permits that treat reagents and ports as part of the mine, with coordinated hazmat limits and joint depots at mid-altitude. Price floors or contract tools that keep competent operators alive in a low cycle so we don't destroy capacity we'll beg for next winter. Investors, same pivot. Stop paying for nameplate fantasies, pay for variance control, ask for winter uptime bonuses, storage depth, duplicate critical pumps, and signed access to at least 2 ports. Reward projects that publish failure trees and pre-stage fixes. Penalize capex that ignores roads, power, and community consent. Optionality is not a trader trick, it is operational slack on the plateau. Here's the crazy part. The cheapest resilience lives in shared stuff everyone avoids because it's hard. Common reagent parks near railheads, pooled hazmat terminals with community oversight, joint gas peakers so DLE isn't a diesel parade, cross-operator storm calendars that schedule maintenance like airlines schedule gates. None of that glows on an investor deck. All of it pays in the only currency that counts up here, hours of stable operation when the sky turns. So the inflection is simple to say, hard to live. Survive by respecting altitude and water. Break by arguing with them. Scale happens, but at human speed, with physics in the lead and politics in the loop. If we align those, the triangle holds. If not, the countdown we built becomes the schedule we suffer. By the time it was over, the story wasn't scarcity of lithium. It was scarcity of minutes, megawatts, and water. The system that promised free sun turned out to run on buffers, consent, and weather windows you can't buy back. That's the $100 trillion lie, fixed by physics, not pitch decks. Subscribe for more financialized geography, share this with someone who thinks maps don't matter, and tell me in the comments where you think the first real break lands.